Saturday afternoon at Grace's parents' place outside Chicago. Smoke from the grill, paper plates, yelling kids, the whole suburban postcard. Her parents had gathered all the grandkids at their lake house. Grandma and Grandpa stood there like benevolent Santa clones, handing out tickets to Dreamland Park. You know, that giant amusement park every kid in the Midwest begs to visit at least once. It was one of those sickly sweet scenes. Each kid got a shiny ticket, jumping, squealing, "Thank you, Grandma!" The works. Then they got to Grace's too, and her father, with a straight face, said, "Oh, Grace, I'm sorry. We ran out of money." Grace watched him say it while still holding a little fan of tickets. Her kids, 8-year-old Nora and 6-year-old Ben, just froze, mouths already stretching into smiles that never got a chance to show up. Grace blinked. "Okay," she said slowly. "Then I'll buy tickets myself." Her sister Nicole actually laughed, out loud. "You're the only outsider here," she smirked. "My kids and yours don't really go together." Right after that, they started handing the extra tickets to the neighbors' kids, right there, in front of Nora and Ben. So yeah, Grace grabbed her 2 sobbing kids, buckled them into their booster seats, and drove away. And later, she did something her family was still choking on. Her name was Grace. If you told her 4 years earlier that her own family would treat her kids like some contagious disease, she would have told you to lay off the drama. And yet there she was, on her parents' lawn outside Chicago, watching her daughter and son stand there as the only grandkids without tickets. Standard, painfully boring backstory. 2.5 years before that, Grace had divorced her husband, Jason. He'd been having an affair with his office manager for 2 years. At home, he'd humiliate her in front of the kids, like it was a hobby. But in Grace's parents' eyes, she was the one who had destroyed such a beautiful family. At first, it showed up as little things. New Year's. Her nephews got new iPhones. Her kids got plain envelopes with a $5 bill in each. Literally 5. Grace pretended not to notice. Kids were small, she told herself. They didn't count money yet. Then it got worse. Her brother Colin's twins got invited to every outing, every party, every family trip. Nora and Ben were forgotten. Funny how selective group chats could be. And the Dreamland Park stunt? That was no longer little things. That was full-blown, weaponized cruelty. That night, after the ticket scene, Grace put her kids to bed, told them some BS story about them going on their own super vacation soon, and sat down with her laptop. And here was the funny part. While her whole family treated her like a broke, pathetic single mom who should be grateful for leftovers, she had actually done pretty well. After the divorce, Grace had built her own event planning business. At first, it was brutal. She was working 3 jobs: front desk admin during the day, barista in the evenings, hostess on weekends. Nora cried herself to sleep almost every night. "Why did Daddy leave?" Nora would whisper, and Grace would smile, chug 3 mugs of coffee, and say, "Because grown-ups sometimes make bad choices, honey. But I'm here. We'll be okay." Eventually, some friends asked her to organize a birthday party. Then another. Then someone hired her for a wedding, for the kind of price that made her hands shake when she signed the contract. A year later, she'd registered an LLC, was doing corporate events, networking through the local Chamber of Commerce, speaking at small business forums. While her family still pictured her wandering through basement shifts, she was negotiating venue contracts and tasting menus. And every single time her family did something cruel, she wrote it down. It had actually started with Ben's 5th birthday. Grace had booked the clubhouse in their condo complex, hired a Spider-Man performer, bought a cake with so much frosting it should have come with a health warning. She was proud. It wasn't luxury, but it was bright, fun, and hers. Nicole showed up with her whole brood, took one look around, and spent the entire party whining. "So modest," she sighed. "Not like ours." When the time came to sing to Ben and cut the cake, she leaned down to her kids and hissed, "Quiet. Don't make a big deal out of this." Ben stood there in his little Spider-Man costume, completely confused why his own birthday felt like a wake. That night, Grace created a folder on her laptop called Evidence. Screenshots of family chats, photos, videos, notes with dates and times. She had no idea it would one day become Exhibit A. From then on, it was a pattern. Her kids got sat at the kids' table every holiday, while the other grandkids drifted freely between adults and dessert platters. In group photos, Nora and Ben were shoved to the edges, or forgotten completely. New Year's again. Her nephews got the latest gadgets. Her two got gift cards to the toy store. Pick something yourselves, while their cousins unboxed electronics. Her brother, by the way, was a subtle kind of jerk. Colin would drop little jokes about single moms who can't keep a man in front of her kids, then grin and say, "Relax, I'm only joking." His wife, Tara, was worse. A snake in designer heels. Their daughter Kylie was always held up as so advanced, clearly from a full family. Meanwhile, Grace's dad, the same one who had taught her how to ride a bike, now looked at her like she'd tracked something in on his carpet. Her mom, who used to bake cookies with Nora, suddenly obsessed over disinfecting the house every time Grace visited with the kids. Then came the New Year's 2 years before the ticket fiasco. The big one. They handed out presents. Grace's kids' pile was about a third of everyone else's. She told herself to breathe. It was just stuff. Then Nicole pulled out Samsung tablets, one for every grandchild, except Nora and Ben. Nora, in the softest little voice, asked, "What about me?" Nicole laughed. "These are for kids who have real internet at home, not like you." Translation: they were poor, trashy, not worthy, and Nicole made sure the entire room heard it. That night, Grace put $4,000 on a credit card. She bought her kids tablets. She upgraded their place to fiber internet. She spent months after that living on rice, beans, and instant noodles to pay it off. And you know what? That decision was what saved her. Because she realized, if she could grind that hard for her kids, she could grind hard for them too. She started taking bigger contracts, raised her prices, organized a $30,000 wedding, and pulled it off perfectly. Her mom heard, and to her credit said, "Good for you, honey," and quickly changed the subject. Her sister rolled her eyes when Grace mentioned she was saving for a condo. "Dreaming doesn't cost anything," Nicole snorted. While they were busy dismissing Grace as a failure, she was building a business. They just didn't stop tormenting her kids. No birthday invitations. Forgotten school concerts. Family trips for everyone that somehow never included Nora and Ben. And then there was Dreamland Park, the last straw. By the time the Dreamland tickets appeared, Grace already had a nice, thick dossier. 35 documented episodes, dates, times, witnesses, screenshots of chats where Nicole called Nora and Ben "those two" and discussed how to see them less often. Statements from neighbors who watched Grace's children be excluded again and again. It wasn't a family misunderstanding. It was a system. Things really snowballed after Grace's Grandma Ruth, passed. Ruth deserved her own story. Everyone else had seen a sweet old lady with lemon cookies. Grace knew the woman who, in the early 1960s, walked out on an abusive husband with a small child on her hip after he hit their toddler so hard the child died. Ruth had told Grace once, "He killed my child. I put our lives in one bag and left for my mother's. They all whispered behind my back, but I worked 3 jobs and bought my own apartment. Then I married your grandpa. He took Leo in like he was his own." She was a survivor, and a shark, in the best way. In the 90s, when everything was falling apart economically, she was buying apartments. "Crisis is just another word for opportunity, Grace," she'd say. "People sell for pennies, and later they regret it." By the time Ruth was done, she had 3 rental apartments in decent areas, a little house out near the river, investments and savings, a collection of mid-century antiques, all together about a little over $1 million. Her will said it would be split equally between 4 grandchildren. Grace, her sister Nicole, her brother Colin, their cousin Jacob from Seattle, around $275,000 each. Not life-changing billionaire money, but not exactly pocket change either. But Grandma Ruth was nobody's fool. She'd watched how the family treated Grace after the divorce. She saw who hugged Nora and Ben and who made faces. So she added a clause. In her will, she wrote that any heir who was found to be cruel toward the children of another heir could be declared an unworthy heir under their state's probate code. That heir's share would be taken away and added to the share of the heir whose children they'd hurt. Legally airtight. And yes, she made it very specific. There had to be proof. Photos, videos, messages. A psychologist's report on the harm caused. Attempts to resolve things peacefully. She even had their estate attorney, Judith Price, help polish the wording so no one could wiggle out in court. Grace knew about that clause. She was also the executor. Grace is responsible and has a degree in economics, Grandma Ruth had told Judith. Grace had kept her mouth shut. She honestly hoped she'd never have to use it. Then Ruth died. Grace found her one morning in March. She'd come over, like always, to make Ruth breakfast and hand her meds. Ruth looked like she'd just fallen asleep. The funeral at church was nice. Candles, hymns, a pastor with a very moving voice. At the repast afterward, held in a community center banquet hall, all 4 grandkids spoke. Grace told stories about baking Ruth's lemon cookies. Nicole talked about summers at the lake house. For a couple of days, Ruth somehow managed to make them look like a normal family. Grace, idiot that she was, thought, maybe this was it. Maybe a death in the family changed people. Maybe they'd rethink things. 2 weeks later, they met at Judith Price's office for the reading of the will. Judith laid everything out clearly. Appraisals on the properties would take about a month, cashing out some investments, maybe 2 paperwork with the county recorder's office, another 3 or 4, all in all, up to a year. And as executor, Grace would be running the show. At Grace's request, Judith said nothing about the unworthy heir clause. Grace wanted to see what her family would do when no one was watching them. Spoiler, they failed in record time. In fact, the first red flag had already popped up back at the funeral lunch itself. Grace had set up tables, flowers, photo albums of Grandma's life. Nora and Ben adored their great-grandma. They were quiet, pale, and clearly heartbroken. They wandered over to the table where Nicole was showing old photos to Grandma's friends. Nora leaned in to look. Nicole swatted her away like she was shooing a puppy. This is grown-up talk. Go find something to do. Something to do turned out to be sitting in the corner, watching their cousins run around like they owned the place. From there, things went downhill fast. Family dinners turned into a ritual of humiliation. Grace's kids were treated like lepers. Separate table, minimal conversation. Only talk to them when necessary. Naturally, the other kids followed the adults' lead and started ignoring Nora and Ben, too. By the time the Dreamland disaster happened, Grace's evidence folder already contained 35 episodes, complete with dates, places, and witnesses. And then, when her kids started having nightmares and panic attacks, Grace did what any desperate mother does. She took them to a child psychologist. Her name was Dr. Elaine. Solid woman, 20 years of experience, the kind of calm that made kids breathe easier. She listened to everything, watched Nora and Ben play, ran her assessments. At the end, she steepled her fingers and said, "This is called emotional abuse through exclusion. Your relatives are punishing the children for your divorce." Grace drove them to Dr. Elaine twice a week for 3 months. $150 a session. Money she absolutely did not have lying around. But Dr. Elaine told her something important. Document everything, and take my written report with an official seal. You may need it. That was when Grace remembered Grandma Ruth's clause. The lawyer, the conditions, the line about cruelty toward the children of another heir. She pulled Ruth's papers out of her safe and reread them, and for the first time she thought, maybe she wasn't crazy. Maybe this was exactly what Ruth had wanted her to do. Ruth hadn't just written a clause. She'd prepared for war. Toward the end, when her memory was already slipping, She'd started keeping a diary. Her aide had helped her write when her hand shook too much. Grace found it when she was going through Ruth's things. Pages and pages of dates and little angry notes. New Year's. Nora sat at the kids' table. 3 empty seats at the adults' table. Ben cried. Colin said sparklers are only for children from full families. Nicole told Kylie not to share toys with Nora. She has germs, Nicole said. Dozens of entries. Detailed. About 10 months before she died, Ruth had called Judith again. 2 hours they'd spent refining the language of that clause. How to define abuse. What counted as proof. How to apply it so no one could claim it was just hurt feelings. Everything by the book. No loopholes. And Grace? She just kept collecting data. Colin's wedding anniversary party, 8 months before Dreamland. Tara had called Grace. You have to come. It's a family celebration. All the kids will be there. Grace bought Nora a sparkly dress and Ben a little suit with a bow tie. They showed up, and it was immediately obvious. They were the only ones who hadn't been included in the group styling session. All the other kids were in matching outfits, obviously planned weeks in advance. Nora and Ben looked like 2 dandelions in a rose garden. Then a professional photographer arrived. He started setting up family portraits. Grandparents in the center, grandkids around them, like a catalog cover. Grace's 2 sat in the corner, picking at the tablecloth. Can we get mine in a shot too? She asked. Colin, Mr. Generous, said, Right now we're doing just the closest family. Maybe later we'll take a couple of big group shots. Later, in their family, meant never. The photographer left without ever pointing his camera at Nora and Ben. Another time, at his twins' birthday, Colin's twins threw Ben's favorite toy car into the pool while the adults laughed. When Grace asked Colin to intervene, he said, Oh, come on, kids are kids. They'll make up. Sure, kids were kids, except hers, apparently. After the Dreamland ticket stunt, Grace spent a week spreading papers across her kitchen table, building a timeline, sorting Dr. Elaine's report, printing screenshots. And then it hit her. She was an event planner. She'd staged surprise proposals on rooftops, anniversaries in estates, corporate galas for executives who thought budget was a swear word. Why not stage an event her family would never forget? An event Grandma Ruth would have thoroughly enjoyed. So Grace booked a place called Riverside Estate, a country club about 40 minutes outside Chicago. Respectable, tasteful, not too flashy, with a private room for 50 people and no easy escape routes. She hired a string quartet from the Regional Symphony Orchestra, 2 violins, a viola, a cello. She told them, Whatever happens, you keep playing. If a fight breaks out, you just switch to Mozart and pretend you've seen worse. She paid them double for the trouble. Grace called her favorite photographer Brooke, a woman she'd done at least 10 weddings with. I need real emotions, she told her. Reactions, like when a bride throws her bouquet. So, a surprise party? Brooke asked. Something like that, Grace said. Only instead of a bouquet, it'll be a bomb. The menu? She designed it with obscene precision. Every one of Grandma Ruth's signature dishes. That 7-layer salad she made every New Year's. Her lemon cookies. Grace practiced for a week to get the recipe just right. Pike and aspic, chicken patties, dried fruit compote. Grace wanted the taste of childhood to stick in their throats when the truth hit. For flowers, she ordered only white roses with baby's breath. Ruth used to grow them at the lake house. A white rose is honesty and purity, Ruth would say. Lies kill it faster than frost. 50 bouquets, so the scent would fill the room. The invitations Grace had printed at the same place that did cards for embassy receptions. The Mercer family invites you to honor the memory of Ruth and witness her final gift to those she loved. Even Grace got goosebumps reading it back. Everyone RSVP'd within a week. Her parents even called to thank her for organizing it. Nicole and her husband Brandon were coming with all 3 kids. Colin and Tara were bringing their twins. Jacob promised to fly in from Seattle with his wife Paige, and their kids Stella and Liam. 32 people in total, counting children. Everyone thought they were coming to discuss their inheritance. Grace knew she was about to burn every bridge in that room. She just didn't want her kids to watch. So she made a deal with her friend Tessa. Tessa took Nora and Ben for the day. Movie, trampoline park, pizza, sleepover. Grace told her kids she had an important work meeting. 3 days before the event, Grace's mom called while she was paying the banquet deposit. Her voice sounded warm, almost like when Grace was little and had a fever. "Grace, I wanted to thank you," she said. "I know we've grown apart lately, but what you're doing for your grandmother's memory is beautiful. She would have been proud." Grace almost dropped the phone. "Thanks, Mom," she managed. "That means a lot. We'll all come together like one big family, just how she loved it," her mother said. "Maybe this will help us mend our relationship?" Something in Grace's chest twisted. Was she going too far? Was this her chance to fix things peacefully? That night, she tucked the kids in. Ben hugged her. "Mom, when are we going to Dreamland Park?" "Soon, buddy," she said. "I promise." From the other room, Nora yelled, "Mom, can I wear my unicorn dress tomorrow? What if Grandma and Grandpa stop by?" "You're going to Aunt Tessa's, honey," Grace called back. She turned off the light and stood in the hallway for a while, letting the guilt wash over her and then drain away. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about protection. The morning of the event, Grace woke up at 5. Her stomach was twisted into a knot, but her head felt clear. She spent 2 hours choosing what to wear and ended up in the dress Grandma Ruth had given her for her college graduation. "In this, you look like a lady who knows her worth," Ruth had said. Grace put on the emerald necklace Ruth had left her, low heels so she could stand her ground, literally, and makeup just sharp enough to remind herself she was no longer the scared girl in the corner. At 10, she sent Nora and Ben off with Tessa. "Be good. Listen to Aunt Tessa," she told them. Nora squinted at her. "Mom, what's going on?" "Nothing," Grace said. "I just love you. Everything's going to be okay." She got to Riverside Estate at 1 in the afternoon. The event started at 4. Plenty of time to check every detail. The coordinator, a young woman in a blazer, led her to the room. "Ms. Mercer, everything looks exactly like on your list. Seating, menu, AV setup. Round tables with white linens, crystal glasses, polished silver. By the fireplace, a framed portrait of Grandma Ruth surrounded by white roses. A small stage for the quartet. A microphone." Brooke showed up next. She walked the room, checked the light, nodded. "Great space. What are we shooting? Anniversary? Gala?" "Technically, a memorial," Grace said. "A very unusual one." At 3, the musicians arrived. Older guy on first violin, clearly had seen it all. "We've prepared Bach, Mozart, Schubert," he said. "Anything else?" "Just one thing," Grace replied. "Whatever happens, you don't stop playing." He smiled. "We've played at politicians' funerals. Nothing rattles us anymore." They were about to test that theory. Jacob and his family were the first guests. They'd flown in that morning from Seattle. Paige looked elegant in black, their kids dressed up like they were headed to a school recital. 10-year-old Stella was chattering about her school play. 8-year-old Liam walked in reading a book. Jacob hugged Grace like an actual brother. "Grace, you did an amazing job setting this up. Must have been a lot of work." "I'm just glad you came," she said. And she meant it. Jacob was the only one in the family who had never hurt her kids. At earlier gatherings, he'd played Battleship with Ben and braided Nora's hair. The only adult who didn't treat them like contagion. Grace felt bad he was about to get caught in the crossfire. Her parents showed up next. Dad wore his formal suit, the one he dusted off once a year. Mom had clearly bought a new dress for the occasion. "Grace!" She tried to hug her. Grace didn't pull away, but she didn't hug back either. "It's all so beautiful," Mom said. "Ruth would have loved it." "I hope so," Grace said, her voice dry. Dad coughed. The lawyer will be here, right? She will, Grace said. Help yourselves to the appetizers. Colin and Tara arrived with their twins right on time. The boys looked like mini Colin clones. Same serious faces, same slouch. Tara was in yet another designer dress, hair styled to within an inch of its life. Finally, Nicole and Brandon made their entrance, like they were walking a red carpet. Kylie glided in first in a dress that probably cost as much as Grace's monthly rent 3 years ago. Logan and Carter trudged behind, already glued to their phones in spirit, if not in fact yet. Nicole wore Dior, or something equally overpriced. Grace wasn't great with brands, but she knew expensive when she saw it. Nicole swept her gaze over the room like a queen inspecting her court. "How cute," she said. "Almost like a real high-profile reception." Almost. Everyone settled. The waiters served appetizers. The quartet began to play Bach. Perfect backdrop. Grace stood by the fireplace, exactly where she'd planned. She started from far away. She talked about Ruth, how strong she'd been, how much she'd loved them, how she'd survived more than most of them could imagine. Grace shared funny stories, tender ones. People relaxed. They smiled. They nodded. For 20 minutes, they were almost a family again. Colin was already mentally spending his share. She could see it in his eyes. Nicole was whispering to Brandon, probably about renovations to the lake house. Then Grace said, "I'd like everyone's attention for something important." The room fell quiet. Eyes brightened. Even the kids stopped fidgeting. "As you know," she began, hoping her voice wouldn't shake, "Grandma Ruth's estate has been settled. She left very specific instructions." Silence. "The total value of her assets is around a little over $1 million. According to the will, it was to be split equally between the 4 grandchildren." She saw Nicole's eyes light up. Roughly $275,000. A very nice addition to her curated life. "But," Grace continued, pausing, "Grandma included a special condition." She opened the folder in her hands, pulled out the papers. To her surprise, her hands were steady. "I'll quote," she said. "Any heir who is found to have been cruel to the children of another heir is to be declared unworthy under state probate law. Their share is to be redistributed among the remaining heirs." Graveyard silence. The color drained from Nicole's face. Colin froze with his champagne glass halfway to his lips. "For the past 3 years," Grace went on, "I've been collecting proof of systematic emotional abuse toward my children. Photos, videos, messages, witness statements, and a detailed report from a licensed child psychologist." Her father jumped up like he'd sat on a live wire. "Grace, what nonsense is this? We love Nora and Ben." "Love?" she asked. Grace took out her phone. "Last Saturday, at your lake house, you looked my 8-year-old daughter in the eye and told her there weren't enough tickets to Dreamland Park. Then, minutes later, you handed the leftover tickets to the neighbor's kids. In front of her." Dad's face turned red. "That was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Grace repeated. "Okay, here's another one." She swiped. "New Year's, 2 years ago. Your grandkids are opening presents. My kids' pile is a third the size of the others. Then Nicole hands out tablets to every child except mine." Grace hit play. The video showed Nora's small voice. "What about me?" And Nicole laughing. "These are for kids with real internet at home, not like you." Nicole's face went from red to chalk. "That's taken out of context," she blurted. "Great," Grace said. "Here's more context." She read dates out loud, showed screenshots, photos of her kids pushed to the edge of group shots, notes from Dr. Elaine about emotional neglect, manufactured sense of rejection, and long-term trauma risk. "You're all sitting here pretending you don't know what I'm talking about," Grace said. "So let me remind you. Colin's son's birthday. Your twins threw Ben's toy car into the pool while he cried. The adults laughed. When I asked you to say something, you told me, 'Kids are kids. They'll make up.' That's your voice on this video, she added, hitting play. His laughter filled the room. The quartet quietly switched from Bach to Mozart, the cheerful melody clashing weirdly with the atmosphere. Grace's mother finally spoke, her voice soft and shaky. Grace, why are you doing this? We're family. Family? Grace laughed once. Where was this family when my kids cried themselves to sleep? When they were humiliated and excluded over and over? You chose my cheating husband over your own daughter, and now you're surprised there are consequences? Dad tried to take back control. We can talk about this. We can find a compromise. Too late, Grace said. She straightened. The probate case was closed 6 months ago. I was waiting for the right moment to share the outcome. Nicole and Colin, she said clearly, have been declared unworthy heirs. Their shares have been annulled. Nicole shot to her feet so fast she knocked over her glass. Red wine spilled over the white tablecloth like something from a movie. You can't do this, she gasped. Over childish grudges? I'm not taking anything away, Grace replied. Grandma Ruth put these rules in place, and these are not childish grudges. This is documented psychological abuse. She turned to Jacob. Your $275,000 is safe, she told him. You've always treated my kids with kindness. Then she looked back at Nicole and Colin. With the redistribution, my share now comes out to a bit over $800,000. You planned this, Nicole shrieked. You manipulated Grandma. You turned her against us. No, Grace said. Grandma saw everything. Here's her diary. She held up the notebook. New Year's, Grace read. Nora was put at the kids' table while 3 seats at the adults' table stayed empty. Ben cried. Colin said sparklers were only for kids from full families. Nicole told Kylie not to share toys with Nora because she has germs. Mom stared at the floor. We can fix this, Dad insisted. We'll apologize. We'll sit down, work something out. The paperwork's already been filed, Grace said. The money's already been moved. Judith processed everything. Colin slammed his fist on the table. You stayed quiet for 6 months? You stayed quiet for 3 years, she shot back. While you tortured my kids. Brandon, Nicole's husband, stood up. Big man, used to people jumping when he raised his voice. So what now? He demanded. You're going to drag our name through the mud? Oh, I'm glad you asked, Grace said. Next week, the local paper is publishing a piece about a new charitable foundation, the Ruth Foundation, supporting children who've been psychologically abused within their own families. No names, of course, but I think a lot of people will recognize themselves. You bitch, Nicole hissed. Careful, Grace said calmly. The photographer is capturing everything. Only then did they notice Brooke moving quietly around the room. No flash, just a professional camera, documenting their faces. You know what the saddest part is? Grace asked, scanning the room. This could have been avoided. Right up until last Saturday, I hoped you'd wake up. I prayed you wouldn't go through with publicly humiliating an 8-year-old girl just to show who's in charge. I asked myself, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should talk to them. Try again. Grace closed the folder. But you made your choice. You broke my kids. Grandma Ruth saw it coming and built a system to protect them, even after she was gone. Then came the exodus. Nicole's kids bolted for the door first. Maybe kids just sensed when the air got toxic. Tara dragged Colin out by the sleeve. We'll deal with this later, she snapped. Let's go. Jacob came over while everyone else was scrambling. Grace, I really didn't know it was this bad, he said quietly. If I had, I would have stepped in. I know, she said. You're a good guy. Grandma knew it too. If you want, I can give you some of my share, just to be fair, he added. You don't owe me anything, Grace told him. You earned it by not being cruel. Her parents left last. Mom was crying silently. Dad looked 10 years older. "Grace," he said at the door, "what do we have to do for you to forgive us?" "First," she said, "actually admit what you did. Not sorry if you were hurt. Not we didn't mean it. Own it. Then, write letters to my children. Real apologies. And give me time to decide whether I want you in our lives at all." "And if we do all that?" he asked. "We'll see," Grace said. "Start by stopping calling yourselves the victims." They left. The quartet finished a mournful Chopin piece. Brooke packed up her gear. Grace stood alone in the room that smelled like roses and burned bridges, and felt relief. On the drive home, her phone exploded with notifications. She didn't read a single one. Tessa was on the floor playing board games with the kids when Grace walked in. They ran to hug their mother, yelling about pizza and cartoons and how Aunt Tessa was the coolest. "Can we go back tomorrow?" Ben asked. "You can do anything you want," Grace said. "We're free." Later that night, she told Tessa everything. "Damn," Tessa whistled. "That was brutal. And kind of cinematic. They're definitely going to sue." "Let them," Grace shrugged. "The paperwork's ironclad. Grandma made sure of it." Sure enough, a week later, Nicole filed a lawsuit. The judge read the will, reviewed the evidence, read Dr. Elaine's report. He dismissed the claim. The will stood. Final judgment. Colin tried a different angle. He sent texts, left voicemails, even showed up at Grace's door. "Grace, we didn't mean it like that," he said through the door. "Kids fight. Families fight. Let's just forget it and start over." She stayed silent. What do you even say to someone who honestly didn't understand what they'd done? 3 months later, Grace got another knock on the door. This time it was Jason, her ex-husband, in a suit, with a tie, and flowers of all things. "Grace, can we talk?" he asked. "If it's about child support, I'm not renegotiating," she replied. "It's not that," he said. "I heard about your family, the court, everything." She let him in, made tea. They sat at the kitchen table like awkward co-workers. "I never asked them to take my side," he began. "I didn't tell them to treat you that way." "But you didn't stop them either," she said. He dropped his eyes. "At first, it flattered me," he admitted. "I was an idiot. A hurt idiot." They sat in silence for a moment. "Nora and Ben suffered because of me," he said quietly. "Because of our divorce. I get that now. I want to fix what I can. Can we try to co-parent, properly? No war, no tug-of-war over holidays. Maybe we can take them to Dreamland Park together sometime." Grace thought about it. Kids needed their father. That was just reality. And if he really was changing... "We do it on my terms," she said. "With a new parenting agreement. In writing. Through a lawyer." They sat down with an attorney. Wrote out schedules, responsibilities, boundaries. And you know what? It worked. Jason didn't become Father of the Year, but he became a decent dad. He showed up. He stuck to the plan. He stopped using the kids as weapons. Without the constant stress and comparison, Nora and Ben changed. Nora joined a theater club and discovered she actually had talent. Ben got into robotics and took second place in a citywide competition. And yes, they went to Dreamland Park. Just the three of them. No neighbors' kids, no grandparents, no competition over who deserved what. They rode every roller coaster, ate cotton candy, took photos with characters, came home exhausted and happy. The real magic, it turned out, wasn't inheritance. It wasn't approval from family who treated her children like trash. It was her kids being safe, and smiling, and knowing they were wanted. Grandma Ruth had known that, and she'd managed to protect them, even from the other side. So what do you think? Did she go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.